In the world of fashion, it takes more than just a great sense of style to build a successful business. Today, we're taking you behind the scenes with 4 incredible entrepreneurs who built thriving apparel empires, each generating over $1 million in revenue. Discover their secrets to success and the challenges they still face in this ever-changing industry. Let's meet our fashion moguls.
Hi, my name is Paul Long. I am the founder and president of Anian Clothing. We're based out of the west coast of British Columbia up in Canada, and we specialize in post-consumer waste textiles. So we take all of your old clothing, natural fiber based, we shred it all up into a mulch and then respin it into usable yarns. So we don't dye any of our clothing, and then we use those yarns to then weave into cloth, and then we use that cloth for our clothing. So we specialize in wools as we are up in the Pacific Northwest. I started in 2013, formalized it in 2016. Have been doing this for about 10 years. We have a team of ranging from 18 to 25 people. We have 2 stores, a warehouse, a wholesale division, all that sort of stuff. And I got my start doing design work for remote wilderness lodges. So all of our goods are made in Canada. And if you go to the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Northwest, you will see us everywhere.
Hey, I'm Dana Donofree, and I'm the founder and CEO of AnaOno, which is chest inclusive lingerie. So we say 2 boobs, 1 boob, no boobs, or new boobs. We are here to support you. And we are redefining the lingerie market to include all different chest types, no matter what breasts are there or aren't there. We've been in business now for a little over 9 years. I started after I received a breast cancer diagnosis in my early 20s. Mid-20s, and I've been a fashion designer for over 20 years. So to me, this was everything that I know how to do. We're located in Philadelphia. We sell our bras around the globe. We're mostly a direct-to-consumer business online with some wholesalers such as Soma, Third Love, Nordstrom's, Neiman Marcus, etc. This is like my passion. It's everything I love to do. I love building product. Owning my own fashion brand was always a dream of mine, but happy to have this conversation because $1 million runway sounds great until you start doing it. There's more to it. So excited to share more.
I'm the older brother, some say smarter brother, so I guess I'll start. I'm Brad Manning. I'm here with Brian Manning, my younger brother. Together we are 2 blind brothers. The name comes from the fact that we both have a rare eye condition called Stargardt's disease, where you lose center vision over time. We were diagnosed as young kids. 7 years ago now, we were walking around talking about some of the medical progress through the Foundation Fighting Blindness, which is the organization that funds all the preclinical research for eye disease. We were shopping in a store. We lost each other. I lose Brian everywhere I go, but I can usually hear his super loud voice and see his visually impaired friendly head. And so we lost each other in this store. We come out coincidentally later with the exact same shirt. What we realized is that if you can't see the prices, the colors, the labels, whether or not it's a men's shirt, sometimes you touch it and you figure out if you like the way it feels. And we've always had that vigilance to touch, whether it was fabrics or learning to read Braille growing up. And so when we walked out of that store, we had this aha moment. What if this was our way of contributing back and making tangible some of what is usually tough to make tangible with this medical research? So we thought, what if we create the softest clothing that we possibly could and donate all of the profits back to the Foundation Fighting Blindness to help find that next cure for retinal eye disease. And that's when we came up with our brand for 2 blind brothers. And I think I took all the good stuff. So I don't know if Brian, if you have anything else to add.
You did great. I'm really proud of you for the front half. And I'm Brian Manning, and we are almost entirely direct to consumer, built on the backs of, Shopify. And the other piece that Brad didn't talk about is the community that's come up around this has been really the extraordinary part of making sure that we're telling our authentic story directly to the people that want to hear it the most and being cheerleaders and evangelists for the blind and visually impaired.
What would the advice be if somebody's just getting started, wants to make it big in the apparel business? What would you tell them that they must do?
The one thing that I hear and know, even between the 3 of us, is we've all been able to essentially elevator pitch why we are different. So whether it is full breast inclusivity through the different bras, whether it is clothing that immediately can provide a positive impact for iResearch or Anian that focuses on post-consumer waste. All of us within less than 30 seconds, even in the first sentence, have been able to identify what we are and what makes us different. In a world that you can buy a t-shirt at a dozen places on every single block in every single city across the world, how are you going to be different? And it seems that that's a question that all three of us here have asked ourselves and really driven down to, and being able to straight up, why are you different and what do you do? There's no humming, there's no hawing, there's no maybe we're this, maybe we're that. All three of us know exactly what we're doing and we stay within our lanes.
I think to add on to that, Paul, because that's great, is that you have to identify as a clothing business, are you a consumer product business or are you a fashion business? Because they are two very different things and they have two very different routes. And spending over, 20 years in the fashion industry myself, I really try to encourage people that if you're going to be a fashion brand, right, you have to be fashion and you have to think of fashion channels. You have to sell your story to the consumer because they want to live your lifestyle, whatever that is. But if you're going to be a consumer product and maybe more of a marketing channel, maybe more of a product with a hook, right? Whether that's, funding research for the blind or, recycling wood pulp or like we do with Chest Inclusive Intimates, you're playing in two different worlds, really. You're playing in clothing, but you're also playing in consumer product goods. And those worlds do function quite differently. So like knowing your lane and what your goal is a huge part of navigating the whole landscape of what does clothing mean to you.
I think to do that is you don't have to be Cortez and burn the ships behind you. You don't have to mortgage your house, raise money from your family, go halfway bankrupt, hope you land on free parking to get the cash. You can go out and start incredibly small. I mean, building a website is very inexpensive and pretty easy these days. Running some original kind of social ad with just you talking to a camera about why your product's great, doing a small run to really find out who that hyper niche audience that is going to care the most about what you're doing. I mean, when we were getting going, the blind and visually impaired community making shirts to donate to research sounds like it's about this big until you start to get into it. And then you realize there's 11 million people that suffer from retinal eye disease. That's a lot of cousins and brothers and sisters. I'm sure the number of folks that need chest or breast inclusive bras is enormous. I just wouldn't think about the size of it originally. So it's not trying to take over every t-shirt in the world. It's what's that tiny percent of population that's going to care about what you say more than anything else in the world. And then just start small with them and then let yourself kind of grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. One thing I think that we all can appreciate is the access to consumers today. 20 years ago, it was very difficult to have the same access to the amount of consumers that we do today. It is an entirely different playing field today than it was 5 years ago, and COVID changed it up even more. More people are used to purchasing online. Through the pandemic, some people did over leverage through that direct to consumer, and we are seeing some of that pushback now. That being said, you're seeing all generations purchase digitally now. It sounds like all three of us here are on Shopify, which is a great platform for us to get that direct consumer. And you're right, Brian, it isn't as difficult today as it was 20 years ago to get into this industry because you're not paying the triple net downtown. You're not getting that walk by traffic. But what you do need to do is you do need to focus on what is that new generation? How is that new digital model working? And just, you mentioned it as well, just keeping your overhead as low as possible. Evan, you mentioned everybody wants a fashion brand and, $1 million plus, and they think it's all glitzy. And Diana, you mentioned it's like, well, you do that. And then you realize that that's not actually that much, because there's so much movement of goods and product and this and that. So I would recommend try to keep your overhead as low as possible and don't worry about people's perceptions, Like I'm in my office, my home office, as it's now officially called. It is a Murphy bed here, and I did fulfillments out of here for years. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with using your aunts and your uncles' garages, which I did for years as warehousing. None of that is bad. That's part of your story. That's part of the creativity to solve these sort of problems that will get you to that $1 million and larger. So, like it is easier now than ever before to access these consumers, as we all have mentioned that we are direct to consumer. And it's also so important for you to keep that low overhead while you are learning about your core people, and then how to expand that core customer as you grow and as your facilities and your processes and all that sort of stuff grows as well.
Talk to me about marketing. I mean, you've probably tried a million different things. Most of them did not work. What are the ones that actually did move the needle that if you are starting over again, you'd be like, this is where I would spend my time, energy, and limited dollars?
The internet.
This was touched on a little bit earlier, but I think that point, because if we're talking about apparel brands, this is going to be the case for 90% of brands. As was mentioned earlier, are you actually like a consumer product that has a feature, or are you a fashion brand? And for most people getting into the apparel base, it's a hard place to innovate from a consumer feature perspective. And so most of the folks out there that I think are looking at this are thinking that there's going to be a sort of a fashion or lifestyle element to it. I think one thing that people don't appreciate is the bar to get attention on what you're doing. It's higher than you think. Meaning that the story that you tell, the way you tell it is going to have to be the most interesting thing that someone has heard all that week. I've done a good job of telling our story, but I'll also say that the story gets better and better and better the more you live with it. You may have an initial kind of spark and feeling and way of communicating it, but it's over that sort of bumping it up against that wall against others where you'll get better at saying it, and there'll be and you'll find the nuances of it that really connect with people. When it comes to advertising, I mean, in marketing, it's a very, very quick evolving landscape. That's the one thing to keep in mind, is that it's a lot of testing. That's the cool part, is you get immediate feedback, whether you're running social ads or you're running Google ads. I mean, all of it could theoretically work at different levels of scale. What I've been shocked by is every 6 months, there are major changes in these platforms, some of which we built our entire business on initially and then became, a minority of our media spend. So that from a marketing perspective, trying new things, not being too overly concerned. I mean, at least with a lot of the brands that we follow, don't be too overly consumed with the production value of the marketing that you're doing. And think about channel message fit. Like, are there certain channels that will fit because your customer is there, or just the format is better? Early on, we did long form video on Facebook and Instagram, which was actually, they tried to deter you from doing, but we had a long story to tell. That's not the case now because things change, but finding that channel marketing fit is very important.
To piggyback on that, Bradford, is I think too, there's an age-old saying, meet your customers where they are. And you really have to understand your demographics. You have to understand who is your ideal shopper, because a lot of what we do, we address a lot of a breast cancer community. So sure, I was 27 years old when I created my line, but most of my customers are over the age of 55 or 60. So before COVID, they weren't even shopping for bras on the internet. It was very difficult for me to get to my core key consumer because she was too difficult to find. COVID helped us with that a little bit. They brought an older generation into the internet environment that felt comfortable shopping. But you do have to identify where is your consumer and how are you going to get to them? Because I can listen to TikTok ad rules all day long, but if my consumer is not on TikTok, I can't advertise there. That is a waste of my money. It is a waste of my time. It is a waste of my energy. So contrary to popular belief, Facebook is one of our strongest channels because that's where my demographic is, right? So you can look at the trends, you can look at where the market is, but if you don't really know your consumer and who's shopping you, you can fail very fast, right? And it's good to fail fast, but it's also hard when you're constantly failing fast because you're maybe not paying attention to those consumer details. where like a hybrid world or in-person events or, working with a medical community might be your pathway to your end consumer, but it might feel more offline than online. And there's, and always striking a balance between those worlds is super important.
Yeah. I'd also say you don't know what part of your story connects with your customer. So make sure that the story that you're telling is the same story that you're telling, and if we're in it every single day, you get tired of that story because you're saying it every single day to every single person, and you're convinced everybody in the world knows your story. And then you meet some person in the same city as you. I live in a city of 80,000 people, and they're like, wait, what do you do? I've had a store here for 10 years. But you can't be dissuaded from that. And you need to continue to tell your story the same as you tell it to every single customer, because you're not sure what part of that story connects with that exact customer. And I think that is very, very important, because we don't know which part that they connect with. And another thing that I would note on, Anian makes a wide variety of goods. So we make jerseys, we make knits, we make wovens, we do menswear, we do women's wear. We are a little bit fashion, but we are a little bit more outdoorsy. So we sort of straddle that. I design clothing that I may not like. My customers like it. So maybe I want to dress in bright colors and floral prints. We're based in the Pacific Northwest. That is not what our customer base wants. So I learned very early on and very painfully that I'm not going to have a successful business making, flamingo pink tank tops. I want that. That does not mean
I'll buy as many as you can make, buddy. You just ship them down to Virginia. You got a customer in me.
Exactly. And I think that is something that a lot of people can lose along the way, is as all of us are designing and manufacturing and creating our products, we need to have an understanding of what that customer is, meet them where they're at, but also ensure that the products that we are creating are what they actually want and not what the designer or, the owner may think that they want.
So diving a little deeper into that, how does somebody determine the right product market fit? I mean, your first design was probably not the one that you're selling right now. And it's easy to get lost in spending tons of money on the wrong path. So how do you quickly test a product, get it to market, start making revenue, and not buying 10,000 of something that sits in your mom's garage?
Test. Like as slim as you can be to get there first is your best, even if your margin suffers, right? And this is like contrary to a lot of popular belief, but like if you can make 100 instead of making 1,000, but maybe you're paying double the amount, right? Like you can curb a lot of your risk by testing first, and rather than going in and jumping right into an Asia manufacturer, buying 10,000 pieces, and then realizing that they break it or miscommunicate it anyways, right? So it's one of those things where you do have to kind of really give yourself an opportunity to make sure that the product that you're making is viable, right? And that somebody wants to buy it and shop it. Because I do want to say, like, I find that that's like the biggest, being in this industry for 20 years, that's usually where people fail, because it does cost money to make product. You don't get that for free, unfortunately. So money's going out the door. If you can't recoup it because all of those goods are damaged or they didn't fit or they were ill-fitting, then you're kind of dead in the water before you even got an opportunity to start.
Yeah, and just to add to that, somebody's testing your clothing. It's either going to be you or it's going to be your customer. So decide who's going to be doing the testing and who's going to be wearing it. Because if you don't test it, they will. And the reputation towards your brand and your company and your future is going to be more detrimental if you have to recall X amount of units because you put them out there and you didn't do your due diligence. So, Diana, like you were saying, it hurts because you're spending so much time and so much upfront money. And when I started Anian, I didn't have my 6 months planned out. I didn't have my 12 months planned out. I didn't have my 2 or 3 years planned out. I was just swinging from the hip and hoping. And I did make a lot of mistakes along the way. And it's taken a long time to build up that multi-year plan. So one thing that I would recommend is before you launch, have some good designs, have some good supply systems, have some good future products and ideas that you sort of have sitting on the shelf, just waiting to pull the trigger on, whether they are your t-shirt designs, your production, any of that sort of stuff, because by the time it comes for you to make that decision, you need to have already done all of the pre-work to make sure that that product is solid to launch.
Yeah, the other thing about it, I think it's interesting, this is certainly true for Brian and I's story. It sounds like it might be true for the others as well. But what's interesting about the product market fit question is that you almost have to be a little delusional to think that the world needs another clothing item that only you can make. That only you can make. The fact of the matter is, Brian and I got into this because we cared tremendously about doing this together. We didn't have a business plan. We thought we would do this for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. We sell a couple hundred units at some fundraising events for FFB. And then we got some media and it started to grow from there. We were doing this regardless of the business opportunity. And we had a radical passion for this. And so what's funny is anybody putting together a business plan for a clothing brand, it's going to face a lot of scrutiny from anyone who they're raising money from, who's coming in alongside them, et cetera. It really has to start with a deep passion from the person starting it. It has to be something that you enjoy so much. I mean, and even Steve Jobs has made this point, I think, where it's like you almost have to be crazy obsessive about it because it can be so tough and so, the chance of failure is so high that you'd almost do it anyway.
What are you guys struggling with right now? So if you give people a peek into the future struggles that they're going to face as they continue to build their business. You've crossed $1 million threshold. What's the biggest thing that you're wrestling with right now?
We've sold out however many times, whatever dozens of times. We still sell out of products. We just had that issue like this week. We've switched fulfillment centers 4 times, and you don't know what it's like to ship a warehouse of stuff across like the country. We one time though, we had a box manufacturer that had a huge issue. So we had to get a new box thing. And I was like, yeah, just ship it in. And the guy was like, I don't think you really understand how many boxes you're ordering. I go, it's boxes, just ship the boxes. He goes, this is 3 semi trucks of boxes. And I was like, got it. I will put a tiny bit more thought into this. We'll get back to you later. So, but today, we've gotten to a place where really making the returning customer, the community that we've built, the population that already knows us and likes us, fall in love with us is really is so critical. Is that, that getting that lifetime value of the customer up, keeping those evangelists involved, keeping them excited, keeping them happy, and always staying kind of new and fresh to them without actually straying from the authentic story that brought them to us, right? Like, how do you stretch your story to somebody new who maybe doesn't care about one piece while staying true and honest to the population that already does care about you so much? And so that's been a big kind of component piece that we, from kind of a theoretical stance, that we sit back and think about every day. And then, we are still hawkish on our overhead. We are hawkish on our inventory. We do try and make sure that all those issues, and the other kind of huge problem for any clothing brand or fashion or apparel brand, holiday is huge for us, right? Like those 2 months represent a huge piece of our year, but you need to order all of that stuff in June, July, and August. So now you need to get the capital in place to actually get all those orders, then get it into the warehouse, and then predict what the holiday is going to bring, which is just an exercise in futility for a bunch of years until we finally got some stability in our growth. But I'll tell you, staying in the community is really the piece that we probably care about and think about most every day.
Yeah, I used to say that starting a business was one of the most challenging things I've ever done outside of going through cancer. And now I say that scaling a business is the most challenging thing I've ever done. And starting the business was actually a bunch of piece of cake. So
it was a good time. It was a blast.
I think that there's just, we've passed 1 million, we've passed our second, we've got eyes on our 5 and our 10, and there's opportunity to grow, but like growing turns into different things, right? And like Bradford said earlier, if you're not passionate about what you're doing and you're not really pushing yourself forward, and you really truly love this, like, the founder fatigue is very real, right? I mean, I've been doing this for now 9 years, and, every year, not to mention the last 3 that have just been disastrous as far as like society and business and work goes, with COVID and, inflation, and now, the future recession, and the job market going up, the job market going down. And you're just, a lot of these external issues become your internal issues because you're actually dealing with them in real time. And you're trying to run and grow a beautiful, amazing business that you're so passionate about. But then you've got all these things happening in the world that are also affecting how you look at your day-to-day business. And so you're sort of balancing on all of these balls in the air. And you've got, we've got problems with workers. We have problems with employees. You have problems with, society and money. And now all of these things become part of your day-to-day decision-making, just so you can continue to run your business. And you start to get, more money is more problems when it comes to business. I don't think it actually starts to solve problems, because more just start generating. So you used to have one problem, now you have 10 problems. And all of those are addressed on a everyday basis. So it can become quite intense.
Anybody that's survived business, not even just in the apparel business, anybody that has survived pre-COVID, during COVID, and now, we all have a different outlook. People famously have talked about black swans, and how science had proven that there was only white swans in the world for all time until somebody saw one in Australia and it was black, and then it disproved all prior scientific data. We are living in a black swan world right now. Shipping no longer holds accountable. Fuel prices are no longer accountable. Your forecasting for your employees is no longer accountable. You can't even get employees I can't find sewing machines. I can't find my parts. My shipping's broken down. My import fees are going insane. Everything that you possibly thought could go wrong is going wrong every day, and you have no control over any of it. So how do you stay calm in a world that you have no control over? And I mean, like anybody that survived the last 4 or 5 years, coming into COVID, during COVID, and now, will probably tell you the same thing, regardless if it's apparel or anything. And it's your ability to move quickly, to stay on your toes, and to lower your overall overhead, as well as being as closely vertically integrated as possible. And I would tell you that is specifically for the clothing industry. Brian, you mentioned the forecasting for the holiday seasons and everything like that. I wish our forecasting was 6 months. I have to be working during COVID, I think we were 18 months out, because I was losing sea cans. I'd order a sea can of material and it'd show up in Athens 3 months later. They just turn off the GPS location. How do you mentally even deal with that? And then, Diana, you were talking about just the founder's fatigue, and you put in so much energy to get this business rolling over 1 million, and you're like, man, this is it. I did it. And then you're like, wait, I just have a whole new table of problems, It isn't ever that you hit this space or this ceiling, and then you're just allowed into a new room and they're like, hey, all your problems are gone. No, they just give you a whole new set of problems that you have no understanding on how to deal with, because all of the solutions that you use to get there no longer apply. So I would say that all of us have been able to stay on our toes and to lower any overhead that is possible. You're reusing boxes, you're counting the amount of pens that are in the office, because all of that adds up over time. And your ability to bounce between ideas, to fail, to retry, to never get dissuaded. I started this because I thought I was going to have no bosses, and now I have hundreds of thousands of bosses. So that also goes back to, if you're starting an apparel company, don't do it for money. Go get a job. If you want to go get rich, go get a job. Because you're not going to succeed as an entrepreneur or in the clothing industry or the fashion industry if you're in this for money. Because you have to be putting in 18, 20 hours a day and see no return. because the product that you're working on might totally flop. So, like, you need to have passion and persistence and be able to move very quickly and pivot extremely quickly between your winners, your losers, new ideas. And I would say all of us that are still here have been doing that because, we're still here.
I know that there's a lot of people that are going to watch this that are interested in starting an apparel brand. They probably wouldn't be watching this video if not. So I know one of the big themes that we've been hitting on is, how you take your creative vision and then you get hit with all these sort of operational challenges. But I want to speak a little bit to the upside a little bit because, a lot of the things that Paul mentioned are things that Brian and I, it's a lot of head nodding. I'm getting a lot of exercise on this. But, from Brian and I's perspective, one of the things that we try to keep in mind is, when we were, 7 years old, told that we were going to lose our eyesight, we didn't know how long, how fast. The only person that I knew with this condition is the guy on this call with me, my brother. And
I was like, Paul? No way. How'd you guys meet?
We grew up, all these little things that we felt very isolated by, learning to read Braille, getting pulled out of school to do that, having to get up in front of a classroom, walking around with books that were 3 times the size of the other kids, having to explain to strangers why we didn't recognize them. And one thing that we never understood about this project when we jumped into it to have fun with each other and do something nice for the foundation fighting blindness are your customers become your community, and they become your community around sort of these brand values that you've created. Brian and I, we get to hear messages. We got a note from a guy who said, "Hey, I'm 19 years old. My name's Joe. I'm in college. I was just diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is a disease that closes in over time, leading to complete blindness." He says, "I've been sleeping a lot." And then the next sentence he wrote is he said, "I've been sleeping a lot because I'd rather be asleep where I dream in 20/20 vision than awake losing my eyesight." And, thankfully, it broke our hearts. Thankfully, he went on to say a bunch of positive things about connecting with the community. But the fact that Brian and I get to be a megaphone for these patients, this community, the fact that we get to have an influence on the kids that were just like us, growing up, on the moms and dads who were terrified like our moms and dads, and say something to them and through, and be able to do a podcast like this so that kid with Stargardt's gets to see entrepreneurs doing what they're doing. It is the greatest reward you could ever imagine. It's so much better than me sleeping under my desk with my private equity job where nobody gave about what I was doing. So I do want to put that out there for the folks that are motivated about this, because it can be a very rewarding experience. And I would love to hear Dana comment as well on that.
Yeah, I'm like smiling ear to ear because like this is that driving force. Like if I was doing this for money, I would have stuck with my career and I'd be a top fashion executive right now with more money than I would know what to even do with, And I think that that's like a reality, right? And when you jump into this, like your community is your customer. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, we've created this community as well, based upon when we launched and the internet and what social media looked like. And we've changed conversations. We've been at the forefront of empowering women to feel strong and lovely about their bodies with or without their breasts. And nobody was doing that for anybody before we launched our lingerie line. And I realized the conversations that we had to have was a part of also identifying the use case of why I was creating different bras. And when I realized the world didn't know what breast cancer was, because all we saw was pink ribbons and, pink tutus, that we weren't actually having the right conversations around breast cancer and how people were amputating body parts to save their lives, right? Like this is a very, very serious cancer. And do we have fun with it? Do we shine a light on it? Absolutely. But like, when I sit there with my team and I drive in like details, like perfection, all of these things, is because that end customer is dealing with the worst day in their entire life. And we want to be a beacon of hope for that. And so I will grind and grind and grind, because we hear those stories just like that every single day about how a life has changed, how a relationship has reblossomed, how people can become confident again, because like, that's why we're doing it, right? Is that passion and that experience behind it all to help make the world a better place, And I mean, Paul, you said it, like, if it's about money, don't do it, because that's not where you're going to find success and be, and find happiness either, because it's not going to come as quick as you think it will.
No.
There is no overnight success. That doesn't actually exist.
No.
But I go to sleep every night hoping it'll happen. When
so
I rest
same.
my head, I'm like pretty confident tomorrow it's going to be there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like every year I'm like, man, next year's the year. Next year's the year. And we all have that persistence. You have that drive, and we all get a kick out of it. It's through the stories, it's through your connections with your customers. It's the Tuesday afternoon when you're spending time with your family, with your kids, walking your dog, being like, this is amazing. I have created something that allows me to live my life as I want to, as well as having a positive impact. But you need to want it more than anything else you've wanted in life. And if you do, you will find success in it, but you need to be pushing harder than anybody else you've ever thought, because it is that push to get you over that hump, to start meeting those customers, because, it'll start out with one person buying one bra. They're going to tell one other person, and then that other person is going to tell one other person, and it sort of seems to be the same story between all three of us. I sold one recycled wool shirt to one person. And I said, tell your friends, wear this. Circular economy can work. Then they came back a year or two later with their friends. So you need the persistence to drive you long enough to allow the community that you're creating to help support you. And I'd say that goes back to, some of your points, Brian, where it's like, maintain that low overhead, keep everything tight. And, Diana, you keep driving it, and you believe in yourself.
You guys have talked about team a lot. I'm curious, what was the most important hire for you? Was it the first hire? Was it a more recent hire? And in terms of the actual role, like, what is this person doing that alleviated a lot of stress for you? What was your single most important hire?
Well,
they might watch this. They might watch this.
I'll be honest with you. We have the greatest team. Like, TBB has just a total rock star team. I mean, we are a tiny, we're not tiny. We're actually pretty big, but we just, the most important hire, we don't know. That's really hard to quantify, because what Brad and I did, which we feel really that one thing that having a disability like, retinal eye disease, blindness, we're bad at a lot of stuff. Like, we're just legitimately not good at many things. And it forces us to hire folks that are good at those things and not have an ego attached to just giving them up, right? Like, I'm not, we're not great at copywriting or detail, or rating through spreadsheets or actually forecasting some of that stuff. So we had to bring in, Angela, who runs all of our operations, who just is a total rock star. Brad is just extremely forgetful. I love him, but he's good at a million things. That's not his best. But Rachel sits there and keeps everybody in line on time and is willing to grab and do everything. And Katie for product came in and professionalized the whole thing, and Ryan with video editing, all that. Like, these folks are just not having ego attached to jobs is so utterly critical. And to let somebody else go be great, if you're going to hire them, assume that they're good. Like, you didn't hire them to be average, and let them just go be great at what you hired them to do, and don't get in their way. Because if you do that, why even have the job? Why even have the role? Why even have a Brad if you're not going to let him go run and be free and frolic and play and do the best thing that he can every single day? I mean, that's the core thing, is don't just hire people and let them work.
When you're small, hire the person, not necessarily the job description, because people wear a lot of hats and you need reliable people who can execute. And theoretically, there should be a lot of low-hanging fruit when you're, getting started. So having those people that can chase those opportunities down with you is very important.
I'll add to that because I don't know if you all have heard this before, because as brothers, I'm sure you guys, you came as a team, which was great, which is great. But I am a solo founder, and for very, very long, as I looked for investment dollars as I was scaling, it was a big nick against my company structure, was that I was a solo founder. I think that also comes a little bit with being a woman. So I add that caveat, because there are very few men that ever get questioned if they have a co-founder or not, but women do. And it's very common. So I think that, when you're thinking about hiring, especially if you're starting this out on your own, I would say, out of both sides of my mouth, try to find a partner, right? Because it does help carry the load. And as you scale, you end up carrying every load on your shoulder. So then when it is time to start hiring people, it's very hard to understand what you can offload and what you need to keep. So I say, to kind of answer your question a little bit, who's your best hire? It's really yourself. Because I think you have to understand, as a founder, as somebody growing a business, what is your optimal skill set that cannot be replaced by anybody else? Once you identify that, if you're the salesperson, if you're the visionary, if you're the executor, know what you are best at and fill in everything else around yourself. Because if you start taking away what you're best at to do things that you aren't so good at, rather than hiring somebody, you're just going to slow down and stall, because it's really, really difficult. So, you brothers, you guys have figured it out, because you're like, hey, we are really bad at these things. But some of us go in saying we can do anything. And then all of a sudden you are doing everything, and getting people to do the other things, that it can be a challenge, because you're just so ingrained in so many parts of your business.
Yeah, I would say hire for trust, hire for the person. Again, I think, Brad, you were saying it, like, don't hire specifically for the job. When you're scaling and when you're growing like this, it is so crazy. You need to be acting so quick, so fast, so on your toes, and also so open. In this discussion, we've talked a little bit about ego. Don't hire anybody with an ego. It's just going to be an absolute disaster, because they get held on to, well, I always used to do the wholesale, so I have to do the wholesale. And it's like, well, no, you're not good at the wholesale. You should go do the operations. Well, I always used to do the operations, so I'm doing the operations. It's like, no, like, what's best for the company? What's best for the team? What's cohesive? And that's another big thing, is as you're growing, you're going to be adding to the team. Make sure that you're creating a team. That is so important. The individual hire is important, but the team is the most important, because you're not going to get to 1 million plus, 5 million plus, 10 million plus by hiring individual islands of ego and attitude and operations or marketing or branding. You need a cohesive brand, and you need a cohesive team. So I would say, when you are hiring people, make sure that everybody can work well together. And, I would tell you, I've failed more than I've succeeded. I have just had the persistence to keep trying. So when you are working with new people, make sure they're okay with failing. Entrepreneurship is all about failing, trying something, having, like, I have the best idea, and then watching it fail, and then having somebody else that you're like, that is such a bad idea, succeed. And then being willing to be like, wow, that's actually a wonderful idea. We should move on with that. So I think it's the characteristics of the person, almost, that's more important than the specific job that we have hired for has been the most beneficial for us.
Amazing. Now, as we wrap up, it's crazy how time flies when you're having fun. I'd love just 2 minutes from each of you. Final message. If you go back and think about you in year one, or you in year zero, getting ready for year one, what would your final bit of advice be?
Just start. This isn't, just start the business. There's conceptualizing and planning and all that are fine and dandy. But just, if you want to be apparel, you want to start an apparel brand, go call a small batch cut and sew, Google it, find one, make 100 shirts, build a bad website. The first website we had was a dumpster fire that, like, literally looked like you were going to get viruses on it. It was terrible. And we just started selling our 100 shirts. And you got to get on the field to actually succeed, because anything in your head doesn't exist. So just get out there. It is so fun. You sell a shirt, you feel awesome. You sell 10 shirts, you feel amazing. Like you sit there and these things start happening. You do that first Fox 5 Chasing News interview and you think you're going to be famous. Like the whole world lights up in front of you. So don't sit there and plan and plan and plan and plan. Start and you will attract the world to you as you need it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, but there is a ton of success there. We started this business with a plan to donate $1 million. That was our big grand goal. Today, we've donated $1.5 million to retinal research. I mean, that is a lot of researchers out there that are going to come up with new cures for blindness. That is a lot of community members that we can make an impact on. That's a lot of kids that are going to grow up with Stargardt that are going to feel 1% more empowered because of it. If you want to be the fashion mogul, you 100% can, but you can't do it in your head. You got to just go make 100 shirts. You got to make the website. You got to film yourself. You got to put out an ad and just be viciously passionate. And you're gonna crush it. And if you don't, bam, 100 shirts gone. You got a great story. Go do the next one. Go do the next one with dresses and skirts and pants and whatever else. And then you'll be sitting on here, and I'll be listening to you because you'll be bigger than we ever could be. So just goddamn start your business and then crush it and then laugh at me. Like that's all I want in the world.
Brian, I'm coming to your TED Talk.
Come on, baby. Let's do it.
I am there. I'm so there with you. I mimic all of that. But to add to that, ask for advice, but don't always listen. And I will say that because I constantly was asking for advice and input, and I was getting a lot of mentorship, mostly from male professionals, because there was very few female professionals I could get networked with 10 years ago. And a lot of that has changed, but, listen to their advice and let it inform you, but don't let it shape you. If I listened to anybody's advice when I told them I was going to make, a new breast cancer bra, if I listened to any of that shred of that early advice, I would not be here today changing people's lives, because everybody told me it wasn't a business. I would never make money. There wasn't enough customers. It was too niche. If it was a problem, somebody else would have already solved it. I can go on and on and on about how my idea was discredited over and over and over again when I first started. But what it did tell me was that advice meant that the world didn't understand what I was doing. And that very much informed my business and the way I've treated my business ever since I've created it. So listen to it. It's not negative, right? It's coming from a point of view and a perspective of people that have been in the industry for a very long time and understand these things. But when I kept hearing it over and over again, I knew there was a big missing link, which allowed me to lean into the disruptive forces I was going to provide. Eventually, I didn't know what they were. I didn't even realize I was disrupting an entire industry, but that's what I ended up doing because I didn't listen to them, right? But it helped me understand how I needed to talk so people did understand what I was doing. So ask for the advice, but they know what they say about opinions. Everybody's got one, just like other things on our body. So, take it as a grain of salt, but it is still important to, seek out that advice and hear it nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, everything that everybody's saying is so true. Believe in your creativity. Creativity will solve the world's problems, whatever they may be, a lot faster than rules and regulations and bureaucracy. So whatever you want to do it full tilt, have the persistence, never give up, but really focus on your creativity. Yeah. The people and the youth and the next generation coming up, you will be the ones that solve our problems. We can't solve them because we're so ingrained with telling people exactly what has worked for us. Now, what has worked for us has brought us to this situation. Now, to move forward in any of our problems, we need creativity and we need a different outlook. Now, as everybody watches this YouTube, take your unique outlook, take your unique ideas, and take all these other clothing brands and ideas and see what they're doing, and then take your own personal spin on them. And you're going to be told no, because nobody else is doing what you want to do. So listen to them, hear them, but don't focus on them. Don't get held down with everybody being like, we don't need that. We don't need this. We don't need that. You're crazy. Don't do that. Because if they had the same vision of you, they'd be doing it, So I would say you just need a lot of persistence and a lot of creativity. And creativity comes at us in all different ways. Some of us, it's through the t-shirt, some of it's through the design, some of it's through the actual product, some of it is your supply chain, all of those little pieces. And, don't discredit yourself and don't discredit your own ideas. Give them a go, get out there and try it. And, just keep trying.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. I guess the last thing I'll say is, I think it's important to reflect on the moment in time that we're living in. I mean, we're really living through a technological revolution. 15 years ago, if Brian and I wanted to start this project, we would have had to do a mass inventory buy, do like a Super Bowl ad, nuance the message, or unnuance the message so that we could, get relationships with giant retailers. Think about the fact that you can almost create a website pretty much for free these days. You can go on a YouTube channel like Evan's and learn, some great entrepreneurial principles. You can take MBA classes for free online from some of the leading universities in the country. And you can test advertising, with a few bucks. I mean, this is a ripe opportunity. Maybe, another 10 years or 50 years from now, these types of opportunities won't exist. So I think it's very exciting for anybody out there who's interested in looking at this. It's not easy, but it's a very rare moment in history where you can do this. So, very excited, and it gets us fired up to hear about other folks doing it. And it's been a real pleasure.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys for your time, for your generosity, for the advice. It's awesome connecting with purpose-driven entrepreneurs trying to make a difference in the world from all walks of life. And I learned a lot in today's session too. Guys, if you like these people, go check out their websites. We'll link it up in the description below. Appreciate everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Evan.
Just start.
To see the top 10 I did on fashion icon Karl Lagerfeld, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
If there's a secret of our success, there's no secret. The only secret is work. You get your act together. There are not so many secrets. And also perhaps a decent life.